Jules Verne thrilled the world with tales of fantastic journeys to the bottom of the ocean, the North and South Poles, and the Moon. Back in the 19th century, none of his adventures was thought possible. Since then, we've realized them all, except one. Is science and technology finally ready to fulfill Verne's ultimate dream? Can we journey to the center of the Earth? Amiens, a small town near Paris, France, was home to one of the most visionary authors of all time. He's known as the father of science fiction. Some say he invented the future. He was Jules Verne. 150 years ago, he wrote tales of adventure and science fantasy, much of which has become science fact. His heroes flew to the moon 100 years before the first real attempt and circumnavigated the globe in days at a time when it took months. Like all Verne's bestsellers, Journey to the Center of the Earth was a product of rich imagination and research. How much did his scientific crystal ball get right? When Verne was writing Journey, little was known about the interior of our planet. The Earth sciences were in their infancy. But the 19th century was a time of great discovery. Journey is set in 1864. Verne's heroes are German professor Otto Lidenbrock, his nephew Axel, and their Icelandic guide Hans. Their quest takes them to the center of the Earth and back through time. Verne's prehistoric monsters were the real thing. The underground ocean he invented. Science and technology, thrills and spills, no other writer captures so well the excitement of exploration and discovery. How much did he get right? Since Verne's time, we've conquered space. But if we are ever to journey to the center of the Earth, we still have a long way to go. Who hasn't, as a child, daydreamed about digging through the Earth and popping up on the other side of the world? If we could do this, where would we end up? Jumping into a hole in Spain would bring you out in New Zealand. Argentina would link to China. And from Miami, you could drop in on Perth, Australia. If these dream tunnels were real, you could just jump in and let gravity take over. Gravity would cause you to accelerate towards the center and then slow you down again, allowing you to step out on the other side. 8,000 miles later. If we could dig a hole like this, what would we find? At the Earth's center is a massive ball of iron known as the core. An outer core of molten iron swirls around it. Next is the mantle, slow-moving hot rock, 1,800 miles thick. In contrast, the crust, the part we live on, is thin. In fact, it's broken into pieces called plates. The crust plates are always on the move. A journey down an eroded canyon is like a journey back in time, because it shows how the Earth's crust has changed and continues to change. Layer upon layer of rock has built up on the surface of the Earth over millions of years and is relentlessly worn away by wind and water. But the deepest canyon on Earth is only 2 miles deep. It's 4,000 miles to the center of the Earth. But how far is that? This airplane is flying at 12,000 feet. The parachutists will fall 7,000 feet before opening their chutes. They free fall at over 100 miles an hour. At this speed, they'd reach the Earth in just over a minute. If they could continue like this to the center of the Earth, it would take over 36 hours. It's as far as Chicago to London. Caves were an obvious starting point for a journey to the center of the Earth. The deepest cave Verne knew of was at Huachara, Colombia. It had been explored to 2,500 feet. Not one for half measures, Verne wondered what would happen if his explorers went much deeper. Jules Verne reveled in technological invention and outfitted his heroes with electric lights powered by chemicals. He knew naked flames were a hazard underground and came up with this original solution at a time when gaslight was still a luxury and electricity known only to scientists. The geologists of the day thought that erupting volcanoes must leave giant tunnels underground. Verne was fascinated by geology and led his explorers past rich seams of minerals and precious metals, and into cathedrals of stalactites and stalagmites built of lime by a billion water drops. Caves had been tourist attractions since the beginning of the 1800s. Verne used these as a route to the Earth's center. But not caves like this. Modern caving began in the 1880s, directly inspired by Journey. Pioneering cavers didn't have the high-tech gear we take for granted. Wetsuits were unknown. Instead of lightweight alloys, their tools were made of steel by blacksmiths. They made their own ropes from hemp or silk, not waterproof man-made fibers, and had to hire porters to carry all the heavy equipment. Today, caving is more popular than ever. Even so, it's thought 9 out of every 10 caves are yet to be discovered. These are the new frontiers in the exploration of our planet. But these days, we know we can't get to the center of the Earth this way. The deepest caves go down only 5,000 feet. But need, and some would say greed, have driven us to penetrate much further into our planet. Early mining started as simple holes in the ground, but as the surface deposits have been used up, we've had to go deeper, digging shafts and tunnels. And if the prize is big enough, it's worth going a long way down. These men are plummeting towards the center of the Earth. They are in search of gold, a metal valuable enough to dig 2 miles down to get it out. The mine is so deep that the cable would break under its own weight if it was continuous. That's why the miners have to change cages halfway. They're already 2,000 feet below the bottom of the deepest mines Verne knew about. Today, this is the deepest mine on Earth. It's also the deepest anyone has been into the Earth's crust. And these miners do it every day, going to work. They're 12,000 feet down. There's a way of going still deeper that doesn't involve digging, but it does require diving. The deepest place on Earth is at the bottom of the ocean. In 1960, a submersible called Trieste got there, a century behind Nautilus, the submarine in Verne's book 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Apart from Nautilus crew, the two men aboard the Trieste are the only people to penetrate this far into the abyss. More men have walked on the moon. Here, the ocean is deeper than our highest mountains. The Trieste dived as far from its surface as the airliners cruising overhead, 7.5 miles. We can get deeper than that by drilling. This is the site of the bid to drill the deepest hole on Earth. In Verne's day, drilling for water was routine, down to around 100 feet. But 5 years before Journey, drills were used to find oil. The technology went into overdrive, but even a century later, the Russian goal of 40,000 feet looked like a step too far. A German attempt had failed at 30,000 feet because the rock was so hot and soft, it sealed the hole. After 14 years, the Russians made it. Core samples were eagerly analyzed by geologists. No one had ever seen rocks from this far down. So how near have we got to the center of the Earth? Cavers venture 5,000 feet down, while miners work at 12,000 feet. And the Trieste plunged to 34,000. Up to now, we've drilled to 40,000. But it's 21 million feet to the center of the Earth. We've barely scratched the surface. Why does this man keep scrambling and squeezing his way down? He's in search of something more precious than gold. Jules Verne lived at a boom time for science, when the natural world took center stage. He trained as a lawyer, not a scientist, but started to devour scientific papers as a student and kept up with new discoveries all his life. Always hungry for material, Verne picked the brains of many top scientists. Charles Saint-Clair Davy, a world expert on volcanoes, provided inspiration for Journey. In the middle of the 19th century, the big questions about the Earth were still to be answered. How old was it? How was it made? For many people, the answers were a matter of faith. The problem was, science was suggesting that may not be true. Darwin had just published his theory of evolution. The world and all living things weren't made in 6,000 years, but millions. Knowing about fossils had prepared Verne for that, but fossils embarrassed the faithful. How could their God let his creations go extinct? When mammoth fossils were found in America, even Thomas Jefferson believed they must still be alive there. It was just too good an opportunity for Verne to miss. In his novel, Verne conjured up a scene in which the professor, Axel, and Hans would find more than old bones. What if they found, hundreds of miles below the surface, ancient species living on? We're still finding fossils all over the world. We have better tools than the hammers and chisels Verne would have recognized, but freeing the precious bones from the rock is still a painstaking task, requiring skill and patience.
Fossils are the remains of plants and animals that once lived. So, for example, if you have a creature that lives in the sea, when it dies, its carcass would fall to the bottom. And over time, the bones would be picked clear of flesh by any scavengers down there. And then it would eventually be buried, presumably by sand or silt. And then in the course of maybe tens or hundreds of years, with pressure of more sediment on top, the bone is infiltrated with minerals. And there you have a fossil.
In Verne's day, enthusiasm often got the better of expertise. Bones of different species might be assembled to make animals that never walked the earth. Things are very different today.
So the paleontologist is a detective who looks at these bits and pieces of ancient plants and animals, puts them together using anatomical knowledge, comparisons with modern forms, and you can literally bring the past back to life.
This may be the oldest plant-eating dinosaur yet found. It lived on tropical islands like those in the Caribbean. So why, Verne would have asked, was this one found in Britain, where it's cold and damp? Because 200 million years ago, Britain was way down south, near where North Africa is today. And the sea level was so much higher, the hills of Britain were islands.
By Jules Verne's time, people understood a little bit about the history of the Earth. Geologists had been studying the sequence of rocks for about 30 years or so. And they realized as you go back in time, you got into more and more ancient rocks, and as you looked at the fossils, you got more and more unusual and ancient-looking creatures.
In his book, Verne was able to bring the past back to life and adapt species of the present to life underground. He knew that plants couldn't survive there since they need sunlight, but figured that fungi could thrive. In the higher temperature and humidity deep down, he had his heroes encounter mushrooms of awesome proportions. But what can really be found on a journey to the center of the Earth? Bats may be the best-known cave dwellers, but they only use caves as hotels, going out at night to feed. You have to go deeper to find a stranger life. Apart from the oceans, no other habitat is so alien to our experience. Most of the animals that live here came from the surface, perhaps fleeing changes in landscape or climate. Over thousands of years, they've adapted to this dark world. They need no coloration to protect them from the sun, and no eyes to see, since they live in total darkness, finding their food by touch and smell. Cave-dwelling animals, known as troglodytes, are difficult to study. They live in such tiny crevices they may never be found, even by the most intrepid explorers. But it's other creatures down here that are exciting scientists today. Creatures so small you can't see them with the naked eye. And to work with these elusive life forms, John Parks faces a commute that most people would do anything to avoid.
We do find